Do any of you ever find yourself sitting under the bar like this because you tried to bench like this or like this? Or listen to these guys because they're strong?
You have to protract
Yeah.
to unrack,
Yep.
then it's too high.
Yeah.
So you want to be retracted, and then there's no movement of the scapula.
Yeah.
Stay retracted.
And then have you ever watched one of those guys actually bench, unrack the bar, protract slightly, retract on the way down, and then protract back on the way up? Yeah.
First thing to do if a movement is really, really painful, number one, is to probably stop doing anything that's painful. So first thing you should do is probably look for another variation of a press, whether it's a machine or a dumbbell press, which have more degrees of freedom that you can actually manipulate to make the movement right for you. It's important to realize that with any kind of barbell exercise, whether it's a press or a pull, we're probably limiting ourselves in terms of the range of motion we can use simply because of the constraint of the bar. Number two, let this thing, the shoulder blade, move. The reason that this thing is attached to your body is because it's something that provides a lot of structural support for the arm. So if you're trying to move the arm in one direction and you're trying to move the shoulder blade in another, that's bad news for the stability and the health of your shoulder. So the practical takeaway here is simply to let your shoulder blades move and to stop trying to manipulate the position of your shoulder blades in exercises that allow more degrees of freedom first, and then transfer that same process over to the bench.
People who tend to focus too much on manipulating their shoulder position will often start with their elbows bent before the bar descends into the press, and you can see that I'm actually not fully locking out as I go through each of these reps. Now in this particular video, I'm much more intentional about straightening my elbows to start, and that's all that I'm thinking about. I'm not trying to control the position of my shoulder blade. My shoulder blades are naturally coming together as the bar descends, and then they're coming apart as I push the bar off of my chest.
A common misconception about movement of the shoulder blade is that protraction or retraction could be characterized as bad or as good, relatively speaking. The problem with this thinking is that just like internal or external rotation or hip flexion or hip extension, they're all just movements, all of which are necessary in varying degrees at certain points in a range of motion. So while certain elite level lifters might say, oh, keep your shoulder blades retracted, when we actually look at the technique of the movement, all these people are actually protracting to a relative degree necessary, depending on whatever the technique of their bench press happens to be. The amount of protraction or retraction that you may need personally is likely different from the next person, meaning that depending on the length of your limbs, the length of your arms, how far the bar has to travel, how high your arch is, all of those things will vary in terms of the degrees, which is why we can't try to consciously control these things. The body will find the best solution for the problem.